when we talk about two-dimensional array, that basically means array of arrays. So I'll show you what I mean. So let's start with new array variable, and I'm gonna create this. Now in this array, I'm gonna place an array like this, and then comma another array, and then comma, yeah, let's just leave that 2 for now. So I'm gonna go inside of the first array, and I'm gonna do first element to be Linda, and then comma, and the second element will do some number. Let's say that's her age. And then we'll do another person, and see, I'm not putting age 27 in quotes because that's a number. So I'm gonna go here and do second person, something like this. So now I have this new array, that's the bracket starts here and it ends here in the end, which has 2 elements in it. This is the first element, this is the second element. And each element in its turn is an array as well. So this is also an array, and that's an array. So now let's get to different parts of this array. So for example, if I do new array 0, new array is this, that has 2 arrays in it. So the first one, 0, which is position 0, is gonna be the first thing in that array, which is this part just before this comma. So it's gonna give me this entire array as a result. Now, if I wanted to get to that person's name, to Linda, if I look inside of this array, it's the first thing, which means since first starts from 0, I'm gonna do 0 and another square brackets and another 0. So if I run this and look at my results, see, I'm getting her name. Now if I change that 0 to 1, run this, take a look, see, it gives me 27, which is the number 27. And that's because this first 0 is gonna give me this array, and inside of that array we're gonna get 0, 1, which is the second element, which is 27. Now if we wanted to get Lisa's name, that would be, if we look inside of this array, this is the first one, which is 0, this is the second one, which is 1. So I'm gonna do 1 and then 0, because inside of this array the first thing is the name. So 1, 0 would give us the name, 1, 1 would give us the age. So if I look at this, and by the way, you can get this log by pressing Command Enter or Control Enter. So that gives me Lisa. Sometimes to make this somewhat easy to read, because these lines can get pretty long, people just move these to different lines, and you can do that. Something like this. Just keep in mind, this doesn't change anything about how this code works. It is still going to run the same way. So this is still our end of statement, which is the semicolon. So just to show you, if I run this, I'm still getting the same thing. Now we're looking at this two-dimensional array. So let's say we want to add something to this two-dimensional array. So to do that, I'm going to do that name of the array, and then dot, and then we add it by using push. Now keep in mind that what I'm doing, I'm adding to this new array, which has 2 things in it, the first thing and the second thing. And by the way, we can find out how many things it has in it, if you remember, by doing new array dot length. So if I run this, 2 things again. So if I do this push, now I want to add another person. Now, but that person has, again, it comes with all this information together. So it's the name of the person and the age, which means now instead of just pushing something like Steve, I need to push an array. So I'm going to do the square brackets and then do comma and then add his age. Now, if I run this, it should tell us there is one more thing in our array, which means 3, right? But if I simply just log the array so I can see what it looks like, you'll see that what we have is this array, see, with 3 arrays in it. So that's first one, this is the second one, and finally there is this new one that we just did, which is Steve. So we're pushing Steve to this. Now, if I take new array and do something like shift. Now, obviously, if you're doing, see, unshift, if you remember, adds a new element to the beginning, which means you would still use the same thing as you would do with push. It would only add that in the beginning before Linda. But shift, if you remember, drops the first element. So the first element in this is going to be this entire array. So if I run this, you'll see now we got only Lisa and Steve. We just got rid of the rest by doing shift. If I do shift again, we're going to remove the next first element and so on. The same applies to pop, right? So if we do pop, it's just going to remove this entire line that we're adding here. Just keep in mind, if you're pushing or doing any of these methods to push on shift, like these methods that I just mentioned over here, then now because you're inside of an array of arrays, you're basically adding a whole array to an array instead of just one thing. Now you could still add to a particular part of this. So let's say we decided that in addition to name and age, we're also going to have their location. To do that, what I'll have to do now, I'm going to push to the appropriate spot of this. So what I mean by that is that after I do this new array, first I'm going to do the index, which is 0. So the 0 is going to be this, which is also an array, the first thing. And then I'm going to do dot push again. And then we're going to add a location. So if I save this, I run this. If I open it, see what happened. We added inside of that first array another element, which is Chicago. Now, I probably want to do that for Lisa as well. So I would do 1 because Lisa is the second one here, and we'll push to that array, which is the third element here, and we'll do something like Los Angeles. So run that. Here it is. So we're adding inside of that array. Now, if you wanted to change something, let's say we're trying to change Lisa's age from 32 to 33. Then we have to get to that by saying new array. And then Lisa is, this whole line for her is 0, 1. And then I have to change the name, right? So that's the first element in here. So that would be 0. And then I would say that is, oh, actually it's a number. So let's say we're changing to 33. So now if I run this, we'll see that hopefully, oh, wrong spot. Let's see what I did. We don't want to change the name. We want to change the age, right? So this would be 1. So that's 1 is the second, and then 1 is the second again. So run this again. So now we got Lisa and the new age, 33. You can obviously change the whole line. So let's say we're trying to change this entire line for Linda altogether. So we can do That's the first line. And we can say now that equals to, now that the line itself is an entire array. So I'm going to change it to an array. So we'll do Bob and then 22. So if I run this, see, we have Bob here, 22. Oh, I forgot we were adding cities to that as well. So let's do that. Good. So now we're basically changing the line. So the only method we didn't use is this concat. So first of all, let me just comment these lines. And let's create another array. I'm just going to copy this. So let's say let's give this a different name. So now if I take this new array, so let's create a new variable. I'm going to take that and I'm going to concat that new people array to it. Log that result. So if you look here again, what we have is basically two of them combined together. Now when you're doing this, you have to make sure that if you're concatenating two arrays, is that they're of the same size and type. So see how we have this array that has this array in it. So basically we're going to take that and we're going to combine them. So this wouldn't work if your second array was just something that was like this. If I take that and I concat that, see what I'm going to get is, well, we got this array, that's the first one. We got the second one, and then this third one, it just added as two different items. So instead of having an array of two things, we just ended up having like third and fourth parts in this main array, which we don't want to do. So you want to be careful with things like this. So if you're passing or combining two arrays, you have to make sure they're of the same structure. So if you wanted to work with the single name, you would put something like this. So that's an array that has an array. And now if I run this, see, now that works. Now let's also do one more thing. Something like this. So I'm going to run this and open. So you can see that this is adding the array to the appropriate spot, but you most likely don't want to do something like this because you want to make sure that it's kind of the same structure as I said before. So if you have this name and age and there is no location attached to it, then you probably don't want to concatenate another array that has a location. So I'm going to get rid of this. Now, one of the things that you need to know is that every time you access Google Sheets and you're grabbing a range of things and you're pulling to script, you basically can just convert it to an array very quickly. So let's do that. So I'm just going to take this and comment this out. I'm going to move down here. Oh, this needs to be commented too. Okay, that's good. Now what I'm going to do first, actually, I'm going to leave this alone and it's getting too confusing. I'm just going to create a new function, call this one test, So make sure I change this here. I'll have to save it first. So it shows up. So first, what we want to do, we want to access the spreadsheet. So I'm going to do variable SS and spreadsheet app. And I mistyped something, didn't I? There it is. So we're going to get active spreadsheet, and then we'll get active sheet. So then I'm going to go inside of that active sheet, and I'm going to use this method get and range. So get range is what we want. So the starting position 1, 1. So that would be the first row, first column here. And then we want to get 4 rows and 3 columns. So comma 4, comma 3. And then what we do, we do dot and do this method called get values. You have to be careful, don't use get value, because get value only works if you have one cell, one single cell. This is a whole bunch of cells, so we have to do get values. And when you do this, let's create a variable, data. So let me just log this out. Oh, perfect. Data. I'm gonna run this. And if I look at this, see what I'm getting. This was my spreadsheet. I'm getting an array of arrays. So that's the main array. And in it, it has the first array, the second array, the third array, and the fourth array. Basically, what we're going to get is that each line is one of those arrays inside. So this first line, AB1, is going to be, see this first array inside of our array. And then we have the second one, which is CD and 2. And then so it goes. And the way you can think about it is that this first main array has all these rows in it. This is the first row, second row, third row, fourth row. And then inside of that, this separation is the columns. So this first one is the first column, second is the second column, third is the third column. So that's how you can simply just grab data from Google Sheets and basically read it into an array. And then you can also take an array and place it in Google Sheets. So let's do an example of that. I'm actually going to just copy this. And remove these comments. So here we go. So this array has what? It has this main array, and it has basically 2 rows in it. This is the first row, this is the second row, and each row has 2 columns. So I want to just place this someplace on my spreadsheet. So let's say we'll put it right here. So to put it right here, first I'll have to get the range where I'm actually placing it. So I'm going to go to my spreadsheet and then get range. And then I have to do the starting row and starting column. So the starting row for this is 1, and the starting column is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1 and 5. And then we'll have to pick, what is this? The 2 columns and 2 rows, right? So it has to go like this. So number of rows is going to be 2, and number of columns is going to be 2 as well. And then what we're going to do, we're going to do set values. Again, don't do value because it's not one cell, it's values. And then as a value, I'm going to pass that array. So if I run that, I go back to my spreadsheet. See, we just placed that array in here. A couple of things that can be modified here to make this better. So if I decide I'm adding another line here, and I do comma here and add another line. Now, if I try to run this, see I'm getting an error. And the reason I'm getting an error is because I said I want to place this array in this area, which only has 2 columns and 2 rows, but now I have 3 rows in my data and 2 columns. So I have to now go back and modify this to 3. Instead of doing that, because we don't want to do this modification every single time, instead of typing 3, we can simply just calculate the length. So instead of typing 3, I'm going to do that array.length. And that should just calculate how many rows we have here and just correct it for us. So if I run this now, I go back, see it worked, no problem. And then finally, this 2 can be also modified in case we decide we're adding new columns or something like that. So instead of typing 2, we just have to calculate the length of this array. So any one of those should be fine, because if we calculate what the length of this, it's 2. Calculate the length of this, it's 2. It doesn't matter. So I'm just going to grab the first one. And the first one means we're going to do that array 0. That's going to give us the first thing in this main array, which is this line. And then we need to calculate how many elements we have in that. So we'll do dot length as well. And this code should run fine again. You can see no problem. But the difference is now if we decide we're adding something here, I'm going to run this. It will automatically figure out how many columns and place it on our spreadsheet. So that's a pretty good start, I think, for our arrays. I think that's enough for this particular video. I'm going to go into more complicated array methods in the next video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.